good afternoon, or good morning, or good evening, because you could be watching this at any time. Anyway, today we're going to take the next step in learning about team policy debate. So hopefully you were able to view the first video, take the quiz. Hopefully that wasn't too challenging for you. But today we're going to take the next step and learn a little bit about debate theory and about case structure. So first, in team policy debate, there are 4 stock issues. They're called stock issues. There are 4 stock issues that apply to every case, and an affirmative team must win all 4 stock issues in order to win the round. So it's very important to understand what they are and how they apply. The negative team needs to win just one of them to win the round. So stock issues are an important way that the round is decided, who wins or who loses, and so we'll try to understand how those are. So in this video we're going to talk about stock issues, plan, structure. So this is important for affirmative team again because they're the ones who will put forward a plan. And then I'll talk about the quiz and notes that you'll need to turn in based on this video. Let's go. So you want to make sure you have this sheet available to you as we go over what each of these stock issues are and how they work. You're going to be given this doc as an assignment, and you'll turn it in with the notes filled in to fulfill that assignment. And of course you're going to want to refer to these notes as you continue to build cases and that sort of thing as we go farther into the debate unit. Okay, so 4 stock issues. Stock issue number 1 is called topicality. What is topicality? Topicality means that the affirmative team's case is topical or fits within the topic of the debate as defined by the resolution. So if we have a resolution that says, resolved that the United States should expand the exploration of outer space, and the affirmative team brings up a case describing this whole plan to fund research and exploration of the Mariana Trench and other deep sea locations, and says, oh no, for real, if we do this, it's going to create all these wonderful advantages and to be good for the country and good for science. Sure, maybe so, but it's not the topic. So the negative team is not expected to know how to defend against arguments outside the topic. Both teams are supposed to be preparing to talk about something within the resolution. And so if an affirmative team begins to bring a case, and maybe they have really good ideas, maybe they're proposing a policy that would just cure cancer, end the coronavirus, create a better working mousetrap, you name it. Doesn't matter how good it is. If it's not within the topic, the negative team can say, Judge, this is not a topical case, and for that reason the affirmative team deserves to lose the round. And the judge should say, yes, I agree, and vote against the affirmative team and give the vote to the negative team, and they will win the round. So that's topicality. It's pretty straightforward. I would say that in my experience, especially competing in debate tournaments, very rarely have I seen a round be lost on topicality. Usually affirmative teams are good about staying on topic. I can think of one time when I was in a round and the resolution was about medical malpractice, about how medical malpractice laws should be reformed in the United States, and I was on the negative team and the affirmative team was making a case about how laws about veterinarians should be changed, so medical stuff with animals, and I argued that that wasn't topical, and certainly I had not done a lot of research on that issue. I had focused on things to do with humans, and it was an elimination or an out round, so there were a panel of judges, and we ended up losing that issue because 3 of the judges were lawyers and 2 were doctors, and the lawyers liked that you could, yeah. So anyway, the next stock issue is significance. Significance is the idea that the affirmative team's plan, what they propose to do, has to be a big enough deal to be worth our bother. So suppose our resolution was to improve the lunch at BCCS. We'll actually use that as the example for a plan later. So, resolve that lunch at BCCS should be improved for students. And, somebody's going down the direction of, well, it would be nice if the lunchtime was a little bit longer. And so the affirmative team says, let's extend lunch by 1 minute. Well, the negative team is going to say, well, okay, maybe 1 minute longer lunch is good, but that's not really enough of a significant change to be worth our even talking about it. Now, there's two kinds of significance. What I just described was quantitative significance. So the quantity of something is significant or insignificant. So compared to the entire quantity of time in the current lunch break that students have at BCCS, 1 minute is an insignificant quantity of time. Now, if I was describing, if you're talking a situation where somebody was cut off from oxygen for 1, 2, 3, 4 or more minutes, a minute's worth of time might be significant. But in this case, it is not quantitatively significant. The other form of significance is qualitative. So some things aren't good or bad, and you can't measure it in terms of like a measurable amount of time or a quantity of something, but in terms of quality. So sometimes something is good for reasons that can't be added up. And you can think of probably different examples of how that could be the case. So maybe there's a good brand of, your favorite ice cream or kind of candy or something you like to eat, and then there's the off-brand that's just disgusting. And if somebody buys you so much of the off-brand or the lower quality brand, it doesn't, adding more to that pile, the quantity doesn't really fix your problem. You wanted the quality. Or, if I gave you 2 rotten apples to eat, and you seemed grumpy and you said, oh, I'll fix it, I will give you 50 rotten apples. No, you won't, because the quality was the problem, not the quantity. So when you're evaluating significance, you need to evaluate it in terms of qualitative or quantitative significance. And the affirmative team needs to provide a plan that's topical, fits within the resolution, and what they're doing is significant enough to justify a discussion or a debate about it. Okay, the third one is inherency. And this one is a little bit of a tricky concept, but it's really important. So when the affirmative team is going to propose that there's something wrong with the way things are now, by the way, the debate term for the way things are now is often, that we often use is called status quo. So you talk about the way things are in the status quo, or in the status quo, the BCCS lunch break takes X amount of minutes, depending on which day it is. So if the affirmative team wants to claim that there's something wrong or not perfect or some reason you'd want to change from the way things work now in the status quo, they need to prove that the problems they think are worth changing over are caused by or are inherent to the status quo and are related to the policy changes that they're going to propose. So if an affirmative team comes in and says, hey, students do not have enough time to socialize and to talk with friends and enjoy the fellowship that is important for mental development or psychological stability, and if we added 20 minutes to lunch, that would be almost doubling it, right? That's probably quantitatively, maybe even qualitatively significant change. It fits within that topic. And they'd say, well, the problem is that, the 30 minutes or so is too short. And you could say, yes, that is a problem that's linked to the current policy in the status quo. Right now, the high school schedule allows for so much time and no more for people's lunches. And so if you say a problem in the status quo is that lunches are shorter than 40 minutes or shorter than 30 minutes, depending on the day, that is a problem inherent to the status quo. There are 3 types of inherency. The first type that we're going to talk about is existential inherency. And that just means that the plan does not exist in the status quo, or that the existence of the problem in the current system is a result of the status quo's policies or lack thereof. So it's kind of a fancier way of saying, does the problem that you're trying to solve exist because your plan hasn't taken place? So if the plan the affirmative team is going to bring is, let's extend lunch 30 minutes, that does not exist in the current schedule. So the problem that they want to fix is inherent. The next one is called structural inherency. Structural inherency claims that the status quo has no capacity or no structure to solve the problems. The lack of capacity is proven by showing a barrier to the plan, so other rules, right? So why don't students have the freedom to spend an extra 20 or 30 minutes at lunchtime? Well, because currently the rules and the schedule requires that they go to fifth period right after lunch, which ends at about noon, not providing them with that extra 20 minutes of time. So the structure, the way things are according to current policies, cause the problem. And the last one, maybe this one would come up, I think this one might be the least important of the three, attitudinal inherency, which shows that the plan proposed by the affirmative, or any plan to remedy the problems in the status quo, will not be implemented because of the attitudes against it in the status quo that prevent the plan from being enacted. So maybe the idea is, well, you could come up to the teachers or to the principal every day for months and months and months and say, please, today, can we have 20 minutes more of lunch? But because the teachers and the administration just don't have a good attitude about this sort of change, maybe they have it within their power to say on any given day, lunch can be longer. But they have this attitude set against it, so it's never going to happen. So the debate would be, hey, wouldn't it be better if we could make them change, or just imagine that they would have a different attitude? You could, in a sense, be trying to provide an argument for why their attitude should be different, and then we'd have this advantage. All right, so inherency seeks to show that the problems are caused by specific things in the status quo, in a sense, is not having the affirmative team's plan the cause of the problems. Therefore, if you had the plan, you could see the problem solved. Which leads to solvency, and this one's pretty straightforward. So an affirmative team sees a problem in the status quo, they think of a plan or a specific set of things, a thing or things to do that would solve the problems, and this simply asks, would it work? So would giving people more time to visit at lunch allow them to build better relationships and have, different benefits that come from that? Would that cause the results that we're saying we want? Would it solve the problem? Would it have solvency? So an affirmative team is required to prove that this would indeed be the case. So these are our four stock issues. Topicality. Is what the affirmative team proposing to do fit within the topic determined by the resolution? Significance. Do the problems that the affirmative team sees and the solution that they propose, are these significant enough to warrant any attention at all? If you're just, doing some tiny, technically it's a difference, but it really doesn't matter to anybody or cause a significant improvement, then it's really not worth talking about. Inherency. Is there a specific reason why not having the affirmative team's plan causes the problems that the affirmative team is claiming? And then finally, does their plan actually solve the problems? Does it really work? And can you prove that it would? All right. So with these four stock issues, let's see how they look in a plan. So this is the basic style for an affirmative team's plan. Now there's a couple of variations, but we're going to go with the basic one. So when the affirmative team gives their first speech in the debate round, which is going to be called the first affirmative constructive speech, and we'll go into what the speeches are called and what order they go in. But this is going to be the first one. It's the only speech in the whole debate round that can be completely scripted. Everything else is more or less impromptu or responding on the fly. But this one can be 100% scripted. The affirmative team will begin maybe with a brief introduction, but at the beginning of their speech, they should state the resolution and show how they want to support it by providing a plan. So in this case, resolved that BCCS high school lunch will be significantly improved. So the next part of the speech will include definitions to prove topicality. So the affirmative team will define key terms or ideas in the resolution to prove that what they're doing fits within the space of the resolution. So if they talk about, they'll say, well, what do we mean by lunch? And they can say, well, we mean the amount of time that students are given to eat lunch between fourth and fifth period. What does significantly mean? Like well, it has to improve the quality of their life in a meaningful way. Improvement, BCCS, whatever you think you need to define to make sure that it's clear you're staying within the bounds of the topic defined by the resolution. All right, the next part is called the harms. Harms. These are the things that are harmful or wrong about the way life is now, in the status quo. So in this section, the affirmative team has to prove that the problems are significant and caused by the lack of their plan, or the problems they see are inherent to the status quo. And you can look at any one of those, the existential, the structural, or the attitudinal forms of inherency, which would need to be proved. All right, so the affirmative team will run, I'd say usually one or two harms. Oftentimes one problem is enough. Sometimes affirmative teams will define two different problems just in case the negative team is able to prove that one of them really isn't a problem. You've still got another one, therefore a reason to change. This leads us to the plan, where the affirmative team can prove that they have solvency. The plan will solve the harms or solve for the harms brought up. The plan includes a mandate, which is the specifics of what is going to be implemented. So, if you're saying, well, our plan is to extend the lunch period by 30 minutes, then the mandate will define that and say that we will extend the lunch period 30 minutes, and now fifth period doesn't start until like 12:30 or something like that. It will define the agency, or sometimes called the agency of change. So who is going to actually carry out the plan? And usually you want to pick somebody who has the authority. So in this case, you might say the principal of BCCS, or the principal and the school board, or whatever body or individual has the type of authority to make a policy change like this. And then funding if applicable. So maybe in your plan to improve lunch isn't involved making it longer, but you say we need to have like a place for kids to make Belgian waffles. The school needs to provide a waffle maker, and then you'd have to pay for it. So you'd have to come up with like, what's your source of funding? And it could be the school budget, or it could be the student government will have a fundraiser, and you have to explain how that will work. So if applicable, funding. Not all plans require funding, but frequently they do. Finally, the affirmative team will prove that their plan, if implemented, will create significant advantages. So kids have a longer lunch. This creates the advantage of happier students. And what's so good about happy students? Well, they're more emotionally stable. Therefore, they're better prepared to achieve academic success in the classroom, or whatever you think you can prove. You have to prove that the advantage is significant enough to be worth whatever you're doing in the plan. And you see the inherency point is back again. You have to prove that whatever advantages you're citing would be caused directly by the implementation of the plan. So if your plan was to extend lunch for 30 minutes and you say, well, this creates a wonderful advantage, namely that the sun will rise tomorrow, and it's so good for the earth that the sun rise. Well, sure, that's a huge benefit whenever the sun rises, but it's pretty hard to prove that that's happening as a result of the plan. It's not inherent to the plan. It would happen anyway. And if it stopped happening, it wouldn't be because we failed to pass this plan. All right, so the basic format for an affirmative plan or case. A lot of times we'll just refer to this as the affirmative team's case. Statement of the resolution, definitions, proving topicality, harms in the status quo that need to be significant and inherent to the status quo, a plan that solves for those harms containing a mandate, agencies of change, and funding if necessary, which creates advantages that are, again, significant and inherent to the specific things that the plan is going to do. So when you think about developing a case, you want to make sure, as the affirmative team, that you have all 4 stock issues proved. Now, take a step back and put on your negative team hat. If you're trying to argue against an affirmative case, you want to think through these stock issues and say, you know what? I only need to prove that one of them isn't happening, and I've won the round. Affirmative has to win all 4. Now, it's a good idea for the negative team to attack all 4 if possible, because you never know which one will end up winning. But you only need to win one. Affirmative team needs to win all 4. And that may seem kind of unfair. How come the affirmative team has this way bigger burden to win the round? And the reason why it's not unfair is because the affirmative team is the one who gets to plan that first speech and basically, decide what the round is going to be about as far as what they're proposing to do. So they have an advantage in that sense, and that's offset by their disadvantage in having more to defend in order to win the round. All right, so go ahead and fill in the notes and submit those through Google Classroom. All right then. If you're feeling a little overwhelmed by a lot of new terms and a lot of complicated pieces to debate theory and case structure, don't worry about it. We'll get into it more and more, and especially when I show you some examples of pieces of debates and how these things fall together, it'll start to make a little more sense. It's normal to feel a little confused and overwhelmed at the beginning of learning about any type of debate. That's certainly true of team policy debate. A lot of it you learn by starting to do it, which we will have more opportunities to do. But it's really important right now that you understand these terms and learn what they mean, because we're going to keep using them as a way to understand what we're doing. More so than almost anything else in this class, debate kind of has its own vocabulary that allows us to understand what we're doing. So make sure you understand what those 4 stock issues are, what they mean, and then you'll have no problem as we start taking the next steps into building cases, designing debate rounds and arguments and all that sort of thing. So let me know if you have any questions. Shoot me an email. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. See you later.